escaped.
And so I'm going to add a little layer of context on this, which might like make the audience be like, well, I don't know what to think now. But sometimes I think we look at success in reverse and then we connect the dots, right? And what's interesting about that is that like most successful people have a painful story, right? I would say that that's common, at least in people that I know, right?
Yeah, I agree.
But here's something else that's also true is that people who are not successful also have a painful story.
Okay.
And so the conclusion might just be that people have painful stories. And so then trying to extrapolate the fact that we had pain as the reason that we were successful, I don't know. Like when people ask me, it's probably more elegant on a podcast, and I think it becomes relatable to an audience of like, oh, I went through shit too, and therefore I can do the same thing, right? But if we were to isolate that, like the things that create the success is the doing, right? It's the action. And so why did I do it? I don't know. I mean, like, I know that when I was having tough times, I would think back to like how I just wouldn't fail, or rather, I wouldn't give up, better stated. And so I just knew that I was going to keep going. You know what I mean? And that's like, I just knew that I would not go back to my life before. Like I just wouldn't. That wasn't an acceptable path. And it's kind of dark when I'll explain an analogy that I thought of a lot when I was going through tough times. But like I think about slavery when I was going through like the very hardest times, right? And a lot of people in America think slavery and American slavery, but there's been slavery across the world for a very long time. Everywhere slavery, right? And so I think about slaves in general, and they do have one choice left, which is that they can choose to die, right? Like if they had the option, they could work or they could die, right? They could obey or die. And for me, when I look at the level of output that slaves had, or at least that they have in my mind, not that I observed slavery, they worked a lot, right? They worked all day long. They worked in tough conditions. They worked long hours, and yet they were able to. And so it's like, how can you have someone who's able to do that? And in masses, all of them were able to do that. And I was like, so then what is it? It's like, well, in that instance, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you have no choice, right? And so the choice was die or work. And so if we take that as a natural extreme, right? For me, going back home felt like death. And so a lot of the big decisions in my life have boiled down to this or die. And I have found that for me, I sometimes have to boil it down to that in order to get myself to do stuff. And so a lot of people see me as somebody who has like lots of work ethic, etc. But like, I don't know if I would necessarily describe myself that way. Like a lot of times I have to just think like this or die. Like the core value of Gym Launch, which is our first bigger company, the first core value was grow or die. And so I think thinking about time and thinking about death has been I think I've been doing that since before I had money. But it's just always been top of mind for me. Maybe that's just like my flavor of it. But in terms of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, I am a big believer in using what you have. And so if you need a reason, then use shame, use anger, use fear, use pain as the thing that quote motivates you. But for me, my like rock top moment was I had my consulting job, which I did not like, and I had enough money and I had enough clout to have a white collar thing, and I had a condo overlooking the city, and I was 22, and I was just like,
Sounds good.
"Is this it?" Yeah, and I was like, "Is this it?" And I just remember thinking on my balcony and being like, "God, like." Over and over again, night after night after night, I would just like hope I didn't wake up the next day. And this isn't like the point of getting to like mental health. I don't want to say bullshit, but like that's not the direction I'm going here. It's just more like I didn't want to wake up. And it was only when I was really confronted with the idea that I was like, that's probably not a good way to live, that it was only then that I was able to like stand up to my dad. And I didn't even really stand up to my dad as much as like retroactively I want to make it sound like that. It wasn't that. I was a fucking pussy. I drove across the country before calling him to tell him that I had left home. Seriously. You know what I mean? I was terrified of my dad. Um, Really, it wasn't even terrified of him like physically. It was more just like I was terrified of his disappointment. You know what I mean? I just didn't want to disappoint him, and I knew that this would be the ultimate disappointment. Like I had done everything that he'd wanted me to do, and it was messed up because the moment when I was the absolute saddest in my life was the moment that he was the most proud of me.
That's that's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah, and that was why it was so tough because I had this positive reinforcement from the person who I wanted approval from the most,
Yep.
and I deep down felt hollow. I hated it, and I just like, and that's when I had to come up with these kind of catchy monikers for myself, which was like I either have to die to him or I have to die to me. And so for me, like that's what I kept repeating to myself, almost like a psychopath, while I was like packing my stuff and making the decision to like get my stuff in my car and put my stuff up for sale and like all this stuff. Like it was just like I have to die to him in order for me to live. Um, and it was just like once I got it to that, I was able to take steps. But until it got boiled down to that decision, I just kept kicking the can. I kept procrastinating. I kept reading more personal development. I kept because there wasn't YouTube then. Like I just kept reading books about self help. What I realized after I read 10 self help books that my life wasn't different, and it was because I hadn't changed my behavior, right? And so one of the things that like that's helped me now, 10 years later, 15 years later, whatever it is that just learning the definition of learning itself, right? Which is that when you learn something, it means that when you're exposed to the same condition, you have a different behavior. So if I show you a red card and then I slap you, right? If I show you a red card again and then you duck, you have learned, right? I show you condition, you change your behavior, right?
Sure.
And so my conditions had not changed and neither had my behavior. So I kept getting, every morning I'd have the same red card put in front of me and I would just get slapped by life. Red card, slap, and I just didn't change. And so one of the interesting things is that you can also measure intelligence by rate of learning, right? So speed of learning. So somebody who learns slow is dumb. Somebody who learns fast is smart.
Hmm.
And so if intelligence is a speed, it's a rate of learning, right? It means how quickly do you change your behavior? And so if you're somebody who reads lots of stuff for years and years and years and you don't change your behavior, you are dumb, right? Or you're dumber than someone who moves faster than you. And so like a lot of people feel like they're big smarty pants because they spend all this time reading stuff, but they don't change what they do. And so it's like if you don't change your behaviors, your environment won't change. And so that was for me kind of some of the bigger findings earlier on of what I needed to do was I needed to move. And if you're in a tough spot, the easiest way to change your behavior is to change your environment.